We are going to meet a few new members of the box modeling construction team. They are employees that are working towards building a laundromat. We did talk a little bit about this in my previous videos, so if you're confused, make sure you watch number 1, 2, and 3, because that might help you in detail understand this metaphor a little bit more. Their job is to create a laundromat. They have Mr. Architect, they have Mrs. CSS Decorator, and we have washing machines. And I know this is starting to get repetitive, and you're gonna be like, seriously, Lynn, when are we gonna pick up the pace? I promise you it will pick up. But for me to understand the difference between our language, because we have semicolons, and we have commas, and we have regular colons, and we have spaces, and we have all these things that do different jobs, the equal sign. And my understanding of all this grammar and the pieces and parts of language actually confuse me in trying to implement them into code, because they're not always exactly what they think we are in understanding the code. They have different jobs, because when you think about it, the way that we communicate with a machine, a user communicates with a machine, is by typing on keys. So every time well, that's one way. There's plenty of ways nowadays, but for our instance, let's just say keys are the only way. If they type in a comma, then that might need to mean something to the machine, and that might be very different than when they type in an equal sign. So basically, we have to find different combinations of keys to actually have a conversation with the machine. So that's why I think understanding these characters is super important, because then you'll kind of understand more of the conversation between the code and the machine. All right, so we are going to meet Mr. Architect again briefly, because I know we have spent a lot of time with him already, but we are going to now color code him red. So anytime I talk about him, I'm going to highlight or make things red, because coloring and color coding for me helps. I don't know if it'll help you or not, but hopefully it will, because again, we're learning alongside each other. I'm by no means an expert, not even remotely close. I'm still such a noob that I remember how hard this can be. Okay, and then we have tag box, and we know that these jobs, or the box, or the job of the tag is to create a box. So basically, Mr. Architect holds all of these tags in his briefcase until he's ready to use them. He has a mix of different types of tags in here. He has block and he has inline. We have not gone into complete detail on what those do, and honestly, I'm in the very beginning of understanding them myself, but I do remember that once I got a clear understanding of those things, I could see a little bit more about how things moved on the page or along the grid. So I do think they're important to learn. Okay, and then we have Miss Betty Block. We have met her briefly, but she is a very important character. She is coming to us today as a div, but she does not have to be a div. She can be all kinds of different things. Okay, in my block of code down here, she is actually a PE tag today. She decided to dress a little bit differently. She likes to change her outfits, as you can tell by her beautiful high heels. She's quite fashionable. So she's a P tag. And then I did forget to go and actually code my P tag here in red. And then we have that's the start P tag. This is the end P tag. And what they have done then is help Betty Block come in and create a box around the content. Okay, content, I do not have a character for. Exactly. You're going to see kind of how that works. All right. The owner of the box model construction company is Mr. Viewport. He is I want to make him green because money equals green, right? In my head, that would make sense. I had all these beautiful colors ready for you guys, and I got them all mixed up, but that's all right. Mr. Viewport. He is the big guy, and he makes all of the money. So basically the goal of the laundromat is eventually to show it to Mr. Viewport. He's the important boss. He's the one that wants to see all the beautiful things that the washing machines are doing in there, and what Mr. Architect and Mrs. CSS Decorator are doing in the Viewport. So really what we're doing is trying to render content onto the Viewport. And render is a really fancy word, and it's fun. It's almost laughable to me in code how fancy they have to get with certain terms sometimes. All that really means is to transmit to another. So if you think about it, you have a screen. You can have any size screen. It doesn't matter. The whole goal of that screen is so the user can actually see what in the world the data looks like or what the information looks like, because all that we're doing is transferring information from one person to another. So in order to make that viewable to another human being, you have to have some kind of viewport. And so that's kind of how I think of Mr. Viewport, as the boss, as the end goal there, that we want the user to be able to enjoy the content. So that's Mr. Viewport's job. So we're not going to really spend too much time. I don't want to muck this up too much, but I want you to connect that the content, then whatever's inside of those tags, is ultimately going to be shown to Mr. Viewport. And hopefully he's happy and he loves it and he loves the work that Mr. Architect and Mrs. CSS Decorator have done. And hopefully it makes the user or Mr. Viewport smile. Okay. All right. Now we are going to move on to the holder family. Red, orange, let's do yellow for the holder family. I'm really bummed about my beautiful colors getting all mucky. Okay, let's try this one. All right, so we have member of the holder family over here. We also already talked about another member of the holder family. He's a little junior over here, we already talked about. So I'm just going to circle him in yellow so that you know that he is, though we called him tag box and he has a specific job over here, he's also a member of the holder family. We don't have a holder family in this code yet. We are going to very soon once I finish introducing all of the people to you. But just know that this is another character in our box model construction company, another employee, if you will. There can be different holders. All right, let's go ahead and erase this so I can make a little more room so you can see it all together. Okay, so we have... I do have characters for these guys. I just didn't want to muck up the page too much, and we will meet them all so eventually. We have this guy, we have this guy, we have this guy. We also have this guy, and we have this guy. This may change as code gets more fancy, but as far as I have gotten, those always are together. They are pairs. So I consider them as one character or one employee at the box model construction company because they are typically holding information. I know that is I know there's going to be coders from California critiquing how I'm explaining things, but remember that I'm teaching to the minds that need a little bit more visual and tactile learning here. But the job of these holders is to contain information so that the machine understands that there's something inside of there, almost as if they work as an invisible box or an invisible container to hold things, is kind of how I think of it. So I referenced them all in my head as I was learning as members of the holder family. And now you'll notice that when you go look in the code, you'll be like, okay, they are kind of paired together. Okay, so remember that they are the holders. Okay. Then red, orange, yellow, blue, green. Let's do some blue over here. Okay. We now have smooth operator, and he's so smooth. He has his awesome tennis shoes on. Okay, I call him smooth operator, but technically he's often known as, at least in JavaScript, as an assignment operator. So if you want to think of him like that, that's fine too. Okay. Mind-blowing information about to come to you. He's not an equals sign. I think of all the code that they could have created, that was probably the dumbest move. I don't know. But I get what they are doing. They are setting a value equal to something. They are assigning a value to something. I know right now you're like, what in the world are you talking about? It will make more sense, I promise. But what he can do in HTML is he can assign information to an attribute, which again, we'll go into in more detail. He might be able to put things inside of something else. Or what's another way to say this? Or he can assign a value to a variable in JavaScript. So I like to think about the assignment operator as actually taking an empty box or an empty container, or an extra holder, and actually putting some kind of value in it and making it, something that you actually want to have. He's assigning something to that particular space. Again, that's probably like, what? A little crazy right now, but we are going to talk more about it here soon. Okay, so I think we have red, orange, yellow, blue, green, purple. I'm trying to go rainbow here. So let's make classy the envelope here. This is the envelope. I reference her as classy just because she helped me understand the attribute class first, but that's not the only attribute that she's going to help us with. So we're going to call her the envelope. That way you don't get those things confused, because I don't want you to think that class is the only attribute that exists in the entire world. Okay. All right, so we are going to pause there for a moment because I have thrown out a lot of different words. I've thrown out the word HTML element and HTML attribute quite a bit, and I want you to make sure that you know that I'm not making this stuff up. It's coming from somewhere, and I'm probably going to show this a million times until you're sick of it. So we are going to go to HTML because that's the particular thing that we're working on right now. Remember, we had Mr. Architect on our worksheet. So if you want to know more about what I am talking about, you can go to HTML elements, and hopefully this looks familiar to you. We have our tag elements, okay? And every element can have an attribute assigned to it. It doesn't have to have any attributes at all. It could have 0 attributes. It could have 1. It could have 2. It could have 3. It could have 4. It could have 6. All right. So to understand a little more about the attributes, you want to go to this particular page, and there's a whole bunch of different attributes that we're going to talk about here. It basically, and I like this explanation, attributes usually come in name value pairs. So we have the one that we worked on before. We had class names, but you can also have an href. And what they have done is made the attributes in red there. Okay. And we have source attributes. We have width attributes. We have height attributes. We have alt. All right, I know that's probably not making too much sense to you because it kind of blew my mind at first. But again, remember that down here, there's another way to actually search for these. These are all the tags. And then here's all the attributes. Okay, that you're going to have. So pulling a few of these out, I've already pulled them out for you. We're going to